today. And I have the lovely and amazing Tamika Caston-Miller. I did attempt to assemble some kind of bio, and it was getting really, really long. So what I do know about you, because I've had the honor of having you in a restorative training and getting to know you there, and I can actually still see you in the room, leaning against the wall, taking it all in. Really, and actually, what I remember most is really smart questions and how present and engaged you are. And also, I think you were transitioning in your life and really excited about like
the possibilities.
Possibilities of life. Yeah. So
Yes.
Tamika, if you're just joining us, Tamika is a linguist. She's a historian. Is that a historian? She has a podcast, which I listened to an episode today, and I highly recommend that episode that aired in May. Where you guys really just kind of hit it hard on social justice issues, and it was just right in the thick of things. So obviously still relevant and applicable months and months later, sadly. Your podcast is great. I participated in a meditation yesterday on your Instagram Live, and that was really
a little teeny tiny meditation. I'm used to leading really long ones, so that was like, just a tiny one.
So my attention span is clearly small, because I was like, oh, this is a long meditation.
That's awesome.
So perspectives, right? Perspectives. Right? So today, well, before we jump into anything at all, I asked if you would just kind of take one minute or even less than that, just to kind of center us. So those that are joining us, I feel like we're, just on and on. And you and I talked about today being this kind of whatever it is.
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind, just center us for a second. I would love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, let's just take a moment to come into that auspicious space of yoga, even just yoga of meditation, of presence. And if you're comfortable with that, just close or lower your eyes. We'll take a breath together. No matter where your breath begins or my breath begins, it's still together. So let's just take in a full breath. And when you're ready, exhale. And as we continue to breathe together, to be together, we step into the space of unity, in the space of higher consciousness, of learning. So we'll take another breath. And exhale whenever you're ready. And the yoga begins now.
Oh, I really, really needed that. So, thank you.
It's amazing what one good breath will do, right?
Yeah, I really needed that. So thank you.
Thank you.
We are just gonna dive in. But I I just feel like I want to ask you this question of, kind of gathering all of your bio, but what I'd love to hear you say, and we haven't talked about this, so sorry, I'm just bringing it on you. But
it's okay.
I would love to hear you say, like, if you were to kind of just define yourself in a couple of words, more character, like what would you say? It's not an easy one, but
it's not. I don't have my prepared elevator speech. No, but I think
I heard you say pitta. So I know that.
You heard me say what?
Pitta.
Oh yes, that's a 8 on the Enneagram, Capricorn. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I am a queer woman of color who is oftentimes finding her space in white spaces. Hoping to bring um, a quality of Shavasana, really, or a quality of, yeah, a quality of Shavasana to the spaces that I'm occupying. And in that, what I mean is that I'm looking to bring people or help people bring themselves into a space where we can abide in the truth of each other's experience, and we can abide in oneness. And in that, I think that it doesn't oftentimes feel comfortable. Kind of like restorative yoga isn't comfortable, even though we do rest a lot. We're doing a lot of work at the same time. So kind of that, following that same vein of, even though it is restful and easeful in terms of the communities that I'm building, actually the work that I'm doing is really uncomfortable oftentimes, because truth speaking is uncomfortable but necessary. So I'm doing that through guided meditations, through yoga that is inclusive for all people, through expanding the definition of what a yogi looks like, um, and creating space for people to be in community without judgment, with the expectation that we're all showing up truthfully.
Mm. There were several things I heard in there that were powerful to me. The quality of Shavasana, which is not what you think it is. It is not just about rest. It is about being with the discomfort as well. And that isn't bodily discomfort necessarily. Like it's just what's happening discomfort, right?
Yeah.
I love that. And this segues really well into, we were going to talk about the whiteness of wellness. And I don't know if you had a chance. So one of our moderators in the group is Hazel Sebron, and she's an ER doctor and fairly new to yoga, but I have really connected with her, and she is amazing. And we had a little chat, similar but different. It centered around the idea of how do we make our yoga a healing space for everyone. And I
Yeah.
think these two topics parallel each other. Perhaps that's a little bit of a nicer way to say it.
Yeah. It is a nicer way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I think I think that healing also looks like asteya. It also looks like truth. It also looks like understanding that there's something really odd and unnatural about walking into a space and seeing all one type of person. It just really is not the way that the world works. It's not the way that the world has really ever worked, except in oppressive regimes. And so when we look at, and I think that's where the historian in me has a really fun time looking at all of these things, because it really doesn't make logical sense to, and I've been that person to walk into those spaces and I'm like, okay, I'm the only Black person in the room today. I'm the only full figured person in the room, and that's what it's going to be, because I'm here for yoga and I'm going to do it. And if I had not been a yogi for a really long time, when I encountered those moments, I probably would not have gone back. But for me, when I started going to a studio and practicing yoga, it was already 8 years after a yoga practice, and so I didn't really care who else was in the room in that moment. But there is something about this healing, the healing nature of what yoga can be and what the community can be. And I think that healing is never a comfortable road. There's always a lot of um, there's truth that has to be encountered. There's trauma that has to be discussed, and it has to be heard and received. and we have to see where where we've caused trauma for others, and we have to face our own trauma that we have in our own lives,
Mhm.
or in our ancestry, our DNA, and just accept that as truth and accept people's lived experiences. So there's that, and I think that when we can do that, when we can meet those moments beyond the spiritual bypassing of, well, we're all love and light and we're all here to do the thing.
Right.
Well, we can like meet it and say, this is odd and this is wrong, and
Yeah.
equity doesn't look like this. Then we'll actually be able to turn this into a healing modality.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. And I guess I'm thinking like because sometimes I feel so practical. Like I really spent some time the last few days reflecting on this, just this word whiteness. And for the most part, I that's what reality is, that's what I attract. I mean, and even changing pricing structure, between free to $5 to, which I feel makes things more accessible. And it's really curious, to me. And I don't know, and I'm not speaking for all white people who do yoga or who teach it, but how do I bridge, and what do I, what is, and I'm not really asking you necessarily to tell me how to do it. That's just a question that I've been struggling
Of course, yeah.
with in terms of making it more accessible. And is that really what people want?
I don't know that accessibility, I'm not 100% sold that accessibility is the true problem.
Yeah.
I know that there is a lot of there are a lot of people arguing that that is the problem, and I'm not trying to take away from their experience or their understandings or anything like that. But as a person who is an educator,
Mhm.
I was a public school educator. I know that particularly in communities of color, that communities of student, at least children, and by children, I'm still talking about 18, 17, 16, will do the work for teachers that they like, regardless of ability. And when they do not like that teacher, they won't do the work. They don't care about how much it could undermine their own efforts and their things like that. So if we look at children as really just younger versions of ourselves, then I think that people will step into the work of yoga when they see people that they like.
Mhm.
Now, so then the question is, then how can and there is the like attracts like, right? So then the question becomes, well, then how do I become more likable for the community? And that's where the question of performative versus
Yeah.
authentic
That's not my
begins.
goal. I'm just
Exactly,
gonna be
because it's
me.
like, and exactly, and that's the thing is, I also have the same problem. There are people within the Black yoga community that only want to practice with Black yogis, and I'm 100% never going to create that space because that's not how I view yoga.
Mhm.
So there are also going to be folks who never practice with me for that reason. I literally am never going to go into a space where my white wife cannot go. That is a deal breaker for me. So, with that said, I find myself looking at the space in between, which I actually think is the goal. I don't think the goal is to like we already said, like this inauthentic performative crap. I think it is. I think the actual issue is bringing people to the practice in general,
Mhm.
and once people come to the practice in general, then they're going to go to the teachers for them. And I don't think that you have to have a social experience in order to be the teacher for somebody, or social experience of blackness or whiteness to be a teacher for someone. But in general, I think that there are just fewer yogis of color who are actually in the practice particularly in restorative yoga. And if you're training restorative yoga, then they're not going to come to you because they don't exist yet.
Mhm.
I do think that people like Gail Parker, Dr. Gail Parker, who wrote the book about restorative yoga and race-based trauma. Um, I think that once people start reading that book and they start realizing that this is a way to heal ourselves from this post-colonial trauma, colonial hangover is what I like to call it, then we'll have more yogis, and then they will actually go to the teachers that are there, and that communicate to their spirit. So, with you being in Santa Fe half the time,
I hear you. Yeah.
you're not gonna have a lot of Black yogis, but when you
Uh,
come to Houston or
yeah.
when you're somewhere else, I think that it's possible when when the students start realizing that this isn't about all of that is Maya, all of that is just like
Yeah.
clouded perception.
Yeah.
And actually, I just want some healing, and I want to heal that for not only for myself but for my ancestors.
Yeah.
So I just think we just build up more yogis.
I would
There
love
are.
I would love to see that. And
Mhm.
I although you don't want to get me started on the yoga teacher training for Black yogis that offered the training for like $200 or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a problem because my thing
It's a
is this.
problem.
So I always tell people, oh, tell us two things. One, when you water down what we're doing, first of all, they're going to get that $200 experience. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you are really affecting negatively the entire yoga community. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I'm
I can't
teaching
hear me
a
nodding,
yoga,
but I'm like nodding
like
like this.
200 hours, that's 200 of my hours as
Yeah.
well. So I'm supposed to be teaching you for $1.01 an hour.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The second thing is that that I think is what people don't understand is you're actually teaching for those 200 hours if you are going according to certain principles and credentials. That's the first thing. The second thing is that um for me personally, I never have a training where 100% of the people are there at 100% of the cost. I also don't advertise that. You know what I mean? But there's
Mm.
someone who's like, I really want to take this training, and I don't know that I can afford it, and I really want to take it. I'm doing all that I can, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, let's work it out. Don't worry about it. Sign up. We'll figure it out, and we work it out and we figure it out. And every single training I've had has someone who has been in that situation. I
Same.
don't have to dumb it down or water it down to $250 because you're Black. I mean, for me, I know, I mean, because you're a person of color doesn't mean that you're inherently poor. I think that also doesn't help the conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think that equity looks that way either. I actually think that equity looks like meeting a person where they legitimately are
Mhm.
and creating options there, and giving everyone giving everyone either a seat at the table or the option to create a new table.
Mm.
That to me is what equity looks like. Um, because we also will learn to ask for what we need
Mhm.
when we feel safe enough to ask those questions. So perhaps the real problem is there being kind of a fear around
Mhm.
feeling safe enough to ask for a scholarship or to ask for that.
Yeah.
Um, or just a fear in general of truth speaking, like admitting that I don't have the money for this and I really want to do it. How do I ask for help? And just kind of not being your own advocate. So I'm not saying there aren't some authentic rationale behind it, but I don't think the answer is, offering a teacher training that would normally cost $3,000 or something for 250.
Right.
That's super problematic in my opinion, and I know that's not a popular opinion.
Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna get the pushback.
I just happen to agree with you. So we're good. It's just you and I talking right now.
As I drink from my Starbucks cup, they're gonna be like, oh, she's already lost her black card because she's drinking from Starbucks. If it helps, I don't shop at Home Depot.
Whew. You're just under
so many rules
right there. Oh my God. I know. This is the day and age of second guessing, scrutinizing, canceling. It's unbelievable. And I think sometimes I just want to go, I just want to live my life. And I don't want to have to feel like I'm on pins and needles. And I think, and that was really my thinking in May, June, July, when things were in terms of social justice were just, I think I'm speaking for me and a small group of white women who I talk to about this kind of thing. And it's, oh shit, we are so privileged. Oh my God, and
it is true. And it is true. I mean, there is a privilege to walking into any space in the United States and knowing that if that space is always going to have a you there.
mm-hmm.
There is a privilege to that. There is a privilege to being able to open up a yoga studio and having the credits and having the money and having all of it that wasn't given to the Black community because of things like redlining.
Mm-hmm.
Those are real privileges. Then I look at, you and I have both talked about yoga therapy, and I look at those programs that are $10,000, $15,000, and I think, who gets to be a yoga therapist? And do we only want to have yoga therapists that had the financial ability to become yoga therapists
Mm-hmm.
when it costs that much? It's not like you can get a student loan for yoga therapy. So we really only want that type of person to be a yoga therapist. I mean, that's really difficult. And it's not like you can apply for a scholarship. If you're married, you automatically don't qualify. It doesn't mean that you want your spouse to be paying 15 grand for it. I mean, there's so many questions around equity when it comes to that. So the privilege is real and the discomfort is needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying for us not to be uncomfortable, and I'm not saying for those conversations to not be had. But what I am saying is that they need to be had in spaces in which everyone's represented so that we can learn from one another, and so that we can give an opportunity to grow as a human community. As long as these conversations are only happening with Black people or with Desi people or with white people or with Hispanic people, we're still in segregated spaces. And what we already know about the world of segregation doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think back to not that long ago when all of this happened, and I was in the middle of teaching a training, and my friend Key and I had a conversation. We were just kind of checking in on one another, and I said, I've been in a bubble teaching. I didn't even know that George Floyd, I didn't know about it. And then one of the students brought it up, and I said, oh, so we paused and we had a conversation. And she's like, well, did you talk to a Black person about it before you had a conversation? I was like, no.
I'm failing.
I was like, oh, I can't get it right. And so it's good. We've had lots of conversations since then, and that feels really, really good and accountable. And I think where she was coming from is, you're leading a group of people. How are you leading? And
yes.
and I really appreciated that reflection, and it's something that I'll probably take with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, Cassandra. Oh my gosh, forgetting her name. Michelle Cassandra Johnson talks about. I did a training with her skill and action training, and she talks about how, like, how are you being a gatekeeper? because you're a gatekeeper for someone, right? So how are you showing up as a gatekeeper? And then who are you letting in? Who are you not? Things like that. And so I think when it comes to being a white-bodied yogi, I think understanding that is a thing, that is higher or closer to the proximity of power is really important to know. And accept it, like this is where I am. I recognize that I'm in the hierarchy, in the caste system, I'm winning. Like, so just like accept that as truth. And then where do you go from there, like with that knowledge? So I think that we keep teaching, and I think that we keep training. And I think also we continue to be in inquiry as to, how to be less problematic and how to be more, how to show up in a more powerful way. I know
What?
that.
Go ahead.
Mhm.
No,
Well,
it's okay.
some folks have been showing up in really powerful ways just by speaking truth to bullshit, just by calling out, you know, these spaces that are really, really white, or calling out their peers. And I say white because it could be white looking or white presenting Latinos or Latinx people. It could be white appearing Black people. It's about a caste system.
Mhm.
And that book Caste really speaks to that, especially for people who want like a horrifying historical reality of how it all came down. Um, but how then do I call this out? And how then do I partner with other people to minoritize spaces?
Mhm.
Because I think that's really what needs to happen, is that this minoritization of spaces, so that
It's
the
interesting you chose
space
that
is
word
different.
over diversify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because if you use diversity,
Mhm.
we're making the assumption that there is a norm, and
Yeah.
so, and the truth is, there is no, in the yogic path, there is no norm. So, but we know in the world that we live in, there are minorities and majority that has been created and crafted for a reason. And so when we minoritize those spaces, then we do have what looks like, what the world actually looks like.
I think you've already said it, but I want to be really clear because we even chatted about this beforehand. How is yoga social justice? I said it right.
I mean, yeah, we were like, wait, what? No, but yoga is social justice because yoga ultimately does not does not commodify people. It doesn't capitalize on other people's discomfort or their oppression.
Shouldn't. As I
Yoga does not.
purely, yeah, pure yoga
Yeah,
does not. What we've
yoga
done
does not.
with it, what we've done with it has.
And that's not yoga, right? I mean, that's actually not yoga. What we like, actual yoga doesn't do any of those things. Now, what humans do,
Yeah.
especially humans who profit off of the commodification of yoga, off of the commodification of other people, other people's oppression, other people's erasure. Now that is there. So I think that when we look at yoga, we're looking at an inherently equitable system of movement, breath, and stillness.
Hmm.
When we look at what has happened using yoga, and it's the same that has happened using a lot of things. The same that's happened using capitalism, same that's happened using religion, same that, we could go down so many routes of how humanity has bastardized things that were actually by themselves, they were not problematic. And then power came into play. So when we're looking at yoga in the US, we have to look at power, because that's really what's become the problem, is we have power at play in yoga. And he or she who has the least is going to be the one that's erased. And so true yoga would never do that. True yoga is going to meet everyone exactly where they are and ask everyone to do the work to come into oneness with everyone else.
Mm.
So it's justice.
Justice. Yeah. Wow.
And I think that it's social justice. You and I talked about how it should just be justice, right?
I think so.
But I think that the social part is understanding that there are humans involved and we fail. We're both Cain and we're Abel, right? We're both Jesus and we're both Peter and Judas. We're like we could go in so many things. And so the social aspect of justice is utilizing what we've learned in yoga to further unity, to further unification, and I like to say, and to cite our sources. Like yoga is not to sit there and claim that we own a system or that we have a style and this belongs to us, and to put a stamp on something. I think that's also another problem. There are a lot of white men who have tried to own yoga, and I think that's really problematic. So when you have that, where are all the brown people? Because this came from India.
Right.
So there's that too. So I guess that return of, or that citing of sources, like this actually didn't come from me. This came from blah, blah, blah. You're getting this information from me because I'm able to interpret this information in a way that resonates with you. And it comes from here. So there's another way of using yoga for social justice. This is truth speaking, asteya, always.
I think anytime you're trying to keep it for yourself or keep yourself in power in some way, that's what we do with branding, with marketing, with neuroscience and marketing, and all of these clever things that we're doing now. All it does is continue to segregate us and prevent the haves and the have-nots and all of that. So I really appreciate how you worded that, and I feel like this is a really juicy conversation. I'm gonna shift gears just a little which is segue to how we're pivoting. I didn't even plan for that.
We're gonna pivot to the pivot.
We're pivoting to the pivot. Oh my God. I don't know. I do know, because I've listened to some things that you've been chatting about, and how, how hard and heavy, I would say most of us that make our livelihood from yoga, like, oh my God, now I got to learn microphones, and now I got to figure out, it's been pretty unreal.
It's been crazy. It has been crazy. There's a teacher in Iowa who I love. She's a yin yoga teacher. And she was talking about how, well, it's crazy for two, just really briefly, two things.
Really only two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, 7 things. So, but the first is that, I'll mention this other lady in a second, but the first is kind of recognizing how students see us as servers or purveyors of a service. That was the first really huge eye-opening moment where people were like, well, what are you going to do to give me my yoga? I'm like, wait a minute.
I was listening to your last podcast episode where you talked about this, and I wrote something down. I just think you might have been prepared to say it just now, but it was that good. You said, you don't need to step out of your comfort zone. You need to step out of theirs. And it was in context, it was to preface exactly what you're saying in terms of there's an expectation. In fact, it made me think about of a student who said, I'm like, why haven't you been coming to restorative? I mean, it's like $5, like, I know, the money thing wasn't really an issue. She's like, I really like to be in the space with you where you can put a sandbag on me. And I was like, I'm good for sandbags. Like, yes, you're right.
I also
Which I
enjoy checking
get.
you in. I also enjoy that. And
I
we're
do
not
too.
there right now. What are you going to do for yourself?
I
You know, it
know.
reminds me of when my daughter moved back home after she went to college, and she lived in the dorm the whole 4 years, which was not my experience, considering that I had my daughter in college. So she comes home from college and she's like, "Where's dinner?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, college educated child, who is an adult who's not lived here for 4 years, make dinner." Like, dinner's wherever your hands are. So I think I'm like, you're old enough to know how to do this for yourself. And I realized that in the yoga space, there were so many people who were just like, well, what are you going to do about this? Like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I am going to do the same thing you're doing, which is I'm going to practice at home and I'm going to take a breath because I'm not quite sure how I want to do this yet. That was the first thing that was the hugest eye opening experience because there were literal relationships ended over that because of them, like, you know, coming at me. And and me, truth speaking, I am an 8 on the Enneagram. So I'm going to speak truthfully. And it didn't go over well. So there was that. And then but the other thing was just how, which is what this teacher in Iowa was talking about, was how affecting it is to not have that same energetic exchange. You know, it's really difficult, especially with restorative yoga, to teach restorative yoga in a space in which you're not there reading the energy, reading the bodies.
Mhm.
And so one of the ways that I had to pivot was, you know, I work for Yoga Works and for myself, of course. Um, but with Yoga Works, I remember there was like no music during classes. And I was like, listen, in a restorative class, people need to know if you're still there.
True.
They just need to know that you're still there. Otherwise, they can't actually relax because they're too busy thinking they lost the feed. At the beginning, I remember people, they would be in a pose and they'd be like, it just kept coming out. So then I was like, listen, I need special permission to play, just even if it's monotone, I need special permission to play music on these in these online classes because they have to know I'm there. They will never relax. And that's not the
Mhm.
point. So that was the first thing, was just like, how do I teach to no one? I remember we were all teaching YouTube live for a little while, Facebook live. You're teaching to zero, you're like, hello, people out there I can't even see. And then when we started doing Zoom, it was a little better, right? Because then we could actually see the people, but then they didn't want to turn their cameras on. And so now teaching distance, I'm like, hey, we're a class. This isn't a Zoom call. This is a class. And we're going to connect just like we would if this were a class. And and you're going to have your cameras on if you want them. Doesn't mean you have to look at it. I just want to be able to see your body, because what if you need some help? And they're like, you look at me? Yeah, I do. Because
Mhm.
nothing's changed in that regard. Since that, the energetic exchange has been better.
Mm. That's good.
But it took a while.
Yeah.
It took a while for that to happen. What about you? How have you been dealing with this?
Oh, similarly, I mean, but we're different. We have different styles. I sort of just joke about it. I'm like, well, if you don't hear anything for a while, just keep resting. Like, don't worry about it. If we get disconnected, then maybe you just needed a longer pose there. Like, you
Maybe your
know,
body knew what it needed.
I don't know. I'm like, I can't worry about it. Like, I just, I usually start the classes now with a little bit of that. Like, we may get disconnected. I'll try to get back on if I can. If it doesn't work, I'll send you an email, maybe with an extra class or something, but I'm not going to worry about it. Like, and
Hmm.
I don't think you should either. So
Yeah.
just really try to take it kind of casually because it's happened and it's uncomfortable and
Yes.
it can be really, I remember in the beginning, really getting stressed out when that would happen. It would like drop and I'd have to get another second device. And then I was like, no, wait a minute. I'm not going to get stressed out over this. This is
I can't
just,
keep doing this. Yeah, no, for sure. There was someone who in my, in my all my classes I play music, as you know. And I know some people don't. In Yin, I play music as well. It's just a part of who. It's a part of my curated yogic experience. You know what I'm saying?
mhm.
And I remember being in, in with Yin. I just, there would always be people like, it's too loud. Or it's not loud enough. It's too loud. It's not loud. I was like, you know what? This is what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
And if it is too low for you, then that is a part of your yoga today. Let's start go. Let's go. But
Yeah.
ever since I've started speaking to those things up front, but it's crazy because it's an entirely new way of teaching.
Mhm.
And so the blessing of teaching in person becomes even more mind blowing, just like, okay,
'Cause
hello, humans.
you guys are teaching in public in Texas, right? You're a bunch of rebels. I mean,
Oh
that's
gosh,
like,
rebels without a clue.
right.
I am not teaching in a walled studio.
Okay.
So
You're
I
outside.
have my,
Yeah.
yeah, the only four walls I teach in are my own via Zoom to those
Right,
people.
right, right.
Who I love dearly, and we've created an entire community via Zoom through that particular organization. I teach in person here at my space, the Ranch Houston, because it is open air.
Mm.
So we have a lot of space. We're on 2.5 acres. Like people are getting prana, like being sandwiched between the mother and father sky and like breathing. And there's like, this is mind shattering. You're like, they're just like, oh,
I think
and they're
it's
really,
lovely. I wish we could, it's just too, you guys are south, so you can kind of do it year round,
yeah.
really. And
Well,
here,
we're going to see.
yeah.
We're going to see. Because it got cold. It got cold. The first day it got cold, I was like,
Oh.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I have zero resources that I could just manufacture just like that. It's not like I could
Yeah,
just turn the heat on.
I
So
love it.
so
Well,
we're continu it's a continual pivot.
yeah. And I think it's going to keep being this way, from what we
Hmm.
hear until spring. And I don't know. I guess I will say this to just to wrap this up, and then I'd like to hear what you think. But I think one of the biggest gifts that I found in terms of Zoom is that for those who perhaps experience trauma, or which is pretty much everyone at this point.
If we're all being honest.
I mean, for sure, and loss. But there's something to be said about our nervous system, about being in our own space, and knowing that a teacher's not going to come by and touch you without permission,
Yes,
and a teacher isn't going to be walking around. They're behind a camera. You have a camera between you and a million miles or however many miles, and so that there is an element of safety in that, and an
absolutely.
agency. And I think that is all new to me, and I really value it, as someone who's,
It's
yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. That there are two others for me. The one is just the cultivation of the home practice, particularly in restorative yoga. You have so many more things you can do at home than you could ever do in a studio. Just because you have all the props. You've got sofas and chairs and the bed. You have all the pillows. So I think that what it has done as well is trained people to know that they have the power to create the experience that they want, in addition to what you just said. Like if someone, I mean, the truth is if I am in a class here at home and they call a pose I don't love, I'm just not going to do it, and I'm not going to feel any kind of way about it because I'm at home.
Exactly.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. I mean, your word, that word agency is huge. And then the other thing is the reach. I mean, we have an opportunity to actually practice with whatever teacher we want in the world, in the world, and there's something really beautiful about being able to find your real teachers, being able to practice with them, and the equity. This is the first time equity is real. All you need is a phone, and you can teach yoga to people.
Mm.
So, this is the most equitable I think it will ever be in yoga for people of color, for people within the LGBTQ community, transgender people, who are also in the LGBTQ community. Sorry to my trans friends, I didn't mean to leave you out of it. I know that especially during Trans Awareness Week. But all of that is finally in a space where everyone has an opportunity to learn. And if it's via YouTube, it's via YouTube. And there's so many people teaching online now. I
Mhm.
mean, I could go to your class and you're in Santa Fe and I'm here in Houston, and it's fine. It's gonna feel amazing because that's what you're delivering.
Yeah.
That's what you do. And
Yeah.
so, so I'm like, y'all go take a class with Miss Melissa Smith right now while you can. Like, you don't have to worry about, you know what I mean? So now, mind you, I have done less recommending because I'm not always seeing, there is so much kind of white noise that I don't actually see where people are teaching or what people are teaching sometimes because there are so many people teaching.
Yeah.
But when I do see it, I'm like, hey y'all, like this is a privilege to be able to practice with her. Do it.
I feel the same way. I want to circle this back to I'm going to kind of go all the way back around in the beginning
We're
to
in
close
flow.
this
We're
out.
just in flow. This is
I
pre-COVID
know, because
flow.
I got just a minute here before I've got to be in my class for grad school. Boy, we're good at talking. We're gonna have to do this again. I was
We
just
are.
checking to see if there were any
It's
comments, and there's no
the
comments.
North Dallas connection.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
we went to neighboring schools.
Oh my gosh, I forgot all about that. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, we're not going to close on Dallas thoughts. All right, but what I would love to hear, and in fact, anyone who's kind of watching this that made it all the way through, seriously, how did we talk for so long? I would love to hear, because we started out talking about the whiteness of wellness, and I would love to hear perhaps what you think, and others can type in the chat as they're watching this later, in particular to this group, because the vision of this restorative and sustainable yoga group, and if you're listening to this somewhere else, we're gonna post it on YouTube, and Tamika might do something with this chat that we've had, so more people will have access to it than just in the group. But in particular to like creating communities, my vision in creating the restorative and sustainable group isn't that it's about me or about any particular style. Even restorative to me could also mean, right, any kind of restful practice, contemplative practice. It could be taking a nap. I mean, really, are we pausing? All of these different yogic, all of them have a basis of yoga or some form of it. What can we do to really be a supportive community? Because that is so interesting to me, because there is so much white noise. There is so much of like, there's 100 different groups you could join, and I just don't want to be that. I want to
Yeah.
be purposeful and intentional in serving people's needs. And I don't know what we could, I don't know.
Well, I think the first thing is we need to stop operating out of scarcity.
Mm,
There are so many people who could benefit from just knowing the abundance of teachers that are available. And
mm,
we don't have to hold on to any of it because there's enough for everyone. So operating out of scarcity mode contributes to people not, advertising other people's things, people not talking about other teachers, people not, so that's one thing. And it's correlated, I think, to the second thing, which is operating out of fear,
mm,
fear of discomfort, fear of change. So I think that what that looks like is if someone says something that's uncomfortable for you, sit with it first. Just like we would in a pose, we're going to sit with it and just see, is it that my body doesn't want to receive the pose, or is it that my body just needs a little bit of time? So
Mm.
I think sitting with the trigger is really important, and then responding from a space of inquiry is one thing that is really helpful. Another way correlated to the scarcity thing, promote other people's stuff.
Mhm.
If people want to come to you to learn something, they will, and they can learn from more than one person. So I think the more and I'm not saying promote at your own detriment.
Right.
I am saying that just elevate voices that aren't always elevated. And I think this is one of those methods. I mean, people know me in Houston, but that doesn't mean that they know me in New Mexico for sure. So this is a way of amplifying a voice that might resonate with someone. And the thing is once you do, now that one black yogi in Santa Fe,
Might be true.
they now they now trust you more
Mm.
because they saw that you amplified someone who perhaps looks like them.
Mm.
Or even it's not about blackness, maybe it's just about being full figured. There are a lot of full figured yogis who do not trust um, skinny spaces.
Mm.
So by amplifying voices of the full figured and staying out of the projections of why we are, blah blah blah,
Mm.
just amplifying those voices makes you a more trustworthy source.
Mm.
So that's what I feel are the two things we can immediately implement.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Ooh. So we'll end on that note, and I just can't thank you enough for just taking time. And one thing I will say, I think I approached you months ago about doing this, and what I really respect is you said, not right now, not right now, and that really struck a chord with me because I think that is the epitome of what we talked about today. It's being authentic and knowing who you are, knowing what to say yes to, knowing what to say no to, and and showing up when the time is right. And that's brave also. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I always appreciate what you bring to the table, and I appreciate your sense of curiosity and your willingness to step into that space. So thank you so much for doing that with me today. And hopefully I don't get too much hate mail for not being you should have said this.
Oh
How
God.
dare you drink Starbucks?
Oh boy. Yeah. We're gonna leave
Thank
it
you
at that.
so much though. I really, really appreciate that. I appreciate
Oh,
you.
my pleasure. All right. So thank you everyone watching this. If you enjoyed it, please, well, if you didn't enjoy it, go ahead and type
Sit with
a
it.
comment. Just let us know whatever you thought, and be sure if you have a specific question for Tamika to tag her so that she knows to go back to the post and answer that. And if you do choose to comment, you might do another little repost of it within the group so other people will watch it, because I think she's right. Really, the more that we talk about these issues, talk about the whiteness of wellness, talk about healing spaces, it really serves to elevate all of us and bring us together in yoga, which is really what we're here for. So thank you, my dear.
Thank you so much.
You're
I'm
welcome.
like trying not to drop my coffee.
Love it. All right. Thanks, everyone.